Hello and welcome back to my channel. Bonsoir et re-bienvenue sur ma chaîne. My name is Muriel and in this video I will be doing a sort of review for a video game. Yes, you heard that right. After movies and TV shows, I thought to myself, well, sod it, why not add in video games while I'm at it? Because yes, whilst I'm not a pro gamer by any means, whilst I'm not a hugely regular gamer either, I've had my fair share of experience playing video games, and I've come to really appreciate good video games over time as well, and recognize the works of craftsmanship in a way they are, and even sometimes the works of art they can be as well. I think it's a very interesting way of telling stories. It's a very interactive one as well. I mean, that's probably the defining characteristic of video games in a way. And some video games have just marked me pretty significantly, and I want to talk about those games. This will mark the beginning of a new series, if you will. I've decided to title a Bookworm in Gamerland, and whilst these will be reviews in a way, I'm only going to talk about video games which I've loved. So they'll all be rave reviews by default. All of the video games I'll be talking about are also, technically speaking, in the super genre of SFF. I think video games are a great way of telling stories in those genres as well, specifically. And I'll also only talk about video games which are original IPs, i.e. they're not adaptations of movies and or books. And for this very first episode of A Bookworm in Gamerland, I'm going to talk about the famed and critically acclaimed, deservedly so, video game that is Bloodborne. That's right, Bloodborne, that one which, if you know anything about video games, you'll have heard of, I assume. I mean, I say that, but I myself haven't played a lot of very, very well-known video games, so whatever, take it as you will. But yes, Bloodborne, this incredible title from the legendary From Software studio, headed by the amazingly creative Hidetaka Miyazaki. I fell in love with this title. It's the first game in that genre I ever played as well. I started my video gaming journey on the good old PlayStation 1, then moved on to PlayStation 2. I'm more of a PlayStation girl, I guess, than a Nintendo one, though I've played on Nintendo consoles as well, or, you know, more than playing on a computer, I guess, so I've also played computer games. So yes, I'm more aligned with PlayStation, but I went straight from the PS2 to the PS4, and I bought the PS4 because the other games I wanted to play, but one of the big reasons was so I could play this absolute masterpiece. Bloodborne is part of the Soulsborne series of games, including the Dark Souls games, and yes, I've played Dark Souls 3 as well, which I'll mention here and there, though I probably won't do a separate review for it, including to, I assume, Sekiro. I think it's technically part of the Soulsborne series at this point, and then there's the upcoming Elden Ring, for which I'm very excited. It was my first Soulsborne game, though technically not my first Souls-like game, I guess, because I played Hollow Knight previously, and I've seen it classified as a Souls-like, though it's also a 2D Metroidvania, so pretty different from something like Bloodborne. It is the first big girl game I've ever played as well. I used to play what I think are called platform games on the PlayStation. Think things like Spyro the Dragon, Crash Bandicoot. Okami, I think, goes a bit beyond that, but I'll get back to that in another video. But nothing even remotely resembling an RPG action-adventure style of game. And even Bloodborne or Dark Souls, I don't think they're traditional RPGs a la Elder Scrolls or The Witcher or Final Fantasy. It slapped me hard in the face. Very, very hard. It's the first, or Hollow Knight was the first really hard game I've ever played. But that really hit me hard in the face, and I savored every minute of it, in between screaming out of rage and frustration, obviously. Bloodborne in particular, though, attracted me because it was sold as a video game which features Lovecraftian elements. That's how I heard of Bloodborne to begin with. I was researching Lovecraftian horror, cosmic horror. I came across this video featuring Lovecraftian monsters in non-H.P. Lovecraft fiction, and the Winter Lanterns were featured in that video, and I was like, what the hell are those things? things, they're part of the video game Bloodborne. So what is Bloodborne? Thus I discovered this game and I was like, I need to play that. Bloodborne basically is Hidetaka Miyazaki's ode, love poem to gothic and cosmic horror. Basically imagine if Bram Stoker and H.P. Lovecraft decided to make a video game baby, is how I'm going to put it. And also, just to be perfectly transparent about this, I haven't finished the game as of yet. I take my sweet time to finish video games. Like, I finished The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild over a year because I binge play through games. I'll play intensely for like a few weeks every day, then drop it for a month and then come back to it. I'm very weird in that respect. So yes, I haven't actually finished or beaten the game. I haven't played the DLC either. I will, however. I most definitely will, probably this month or next month. So first I'm going to give like the very basic premise of Bloodborne. You wake up on this operating table, I think, or medical examination table in the city of Yharnam, which I guess is loosely modelled off of Victorian London, maybe. I mean, that general idea of setting. You are a hunter, you've come to get a treatment based on blood. Then a monster, a kind of werewolf type of creature, seemingly is about to attack you, and then little white critters crawl over you, you pass out, and then you wake up in a clinic. And that's how the video game starts. It just takes you, drops you in the world, and you gotta figure shit out on your own. This is not the kind of game that holds your hand in the slightest. So yeah, you are a hunter and you are meant to participate in this hunt throughout Yharnam because the people of Yharnam have been afflicted with this strange illness epidemic that makes them turn into wild, savage beasts. Again, think werewolf-type creatures or less savory creatures than that. And there's a creepy church involved, and blood-based treatments involved, and stranger and weirder things as you progress into the game. Again, I'm not specifically going to go into spoiler territory on purpose, but I might get into elements further on that are a bit spoilery. La, la, la. Basically, it's a very dark, creepy, somewhat nihilistic world. You're alone. You are on your own. There aren't that many NPCs overall in the game. Most of the people you will encounter are either cynical, depressed, crazy, or want to rip your guts out. I had a lot of fun going through like some of the NPCs I could bring to a certain location. And for example, there's this old lady I saved from being ripped to shreds by beasts. And this lady proceeded to insult me thoroughly every time I came back to talk to her. So I was like, what's your problem, bitch? And then after a while, she just started laughing maniacally all the time. And you'll encounter a lot of maniacal laughter in this game. It's pretty unsettling, but then again, it's meant to be, most definitely. Everything is just sad and scary and depressed. And you just, yeah, faced with the fact that you're completely alone, trying to figure shit out without any help. I mean, you do get a bit of help from like a couple of NPCs, but again, no spoilers. Otherwise, yeah, and everything wants to kill you pretty aggressively, I might add, even when you're trying to help out. Though, are you actually helping out is perhaps one of the questions posed by the story of this game. Bloodborne is just so bloody atmospheric. That's just one of the things that attracted me to it. You're just immersed in that world, trying not to get killed. So your adrenaline is coursing pretty violently through your body, but the ambiance is just insane. The soundscapes, I'll get back to that obviously, the visual aspect of it, the music too, the creature design, you just plunged into this universe, this nightmarish universe, and dreams and nightmares also a pretty important thematic aspect of Bloodborne. You're in that nightmare and you're trying to survive it on your own. I keep repeating on your own, but I mean, you really are confronted with being alone, surrounded by vicious people and desperate people and crazy people and creatures trying to rip your head off. There's something just unqualifiable in a way about Bloodborne, which I find interesting given that it does take some of its inspiration from Lovecraftian fiction, and Lovecraftian fiction does deal with the unknowable and how scary that is. So that's fairly poetic in a way if you think about it. Yes, Yharnam is a very special setting, and obviously there isn't just that urban setting of Yharnam, which really riffs off of any big city in Victorian-era Europe. And you have to figure your way through this city and the adjacent environments, because it's also a pretty maze-like game, so you'll oftentimes feel a bit lost and confused and trying to get your bearings, but then you get that insane sense of satisfaction when you find a shortcut, and okay, I know where I am, and I can get to that area through here, avoiding a mob of insane monster-type people who want to kill me. And so I said that dreams and nightmares are an important thematic element of Bloodborne. Now, to be very clear, I'm not specifically going to dive that deeply into the themes of any of the games I'm going to talk about, because I think the themes are really part of the experience of playing through the game in a way. I can't really talk about them like I would in a movie or a book. I'm sure other people could, but that's not really how I want to approach this. However, this idea of what is reality, there are different levels to reality, and playing around with, was what you went through real? Was it a nightmare, a dream? What are dreams, what are nightmares? Again, very Lovecraftian, very trippy. I mean, I love that kind of theming generally in fiction. And yeah, playing around with parallel dimensions and eldritch beings, I'll leave it at that. The sense of sadness and decay and destruction. And decay and destruction, you'll find that as well in Dark Souls very specifically. Because the city of Yharnam, you're getting there after certain events have taken place and thing has gone to absolute shite. People are dying left, right and center, people are going crazy, turning into monsters. It's kind of a last desperate attempt to make things somewhat right. So there's a very despairing aspect to the atmosphere. There's a lot of sadness and horrible things happen, and some of the NPC quest lines are extremely effing sad. I don't think it's a depressing game, but it's dark. It's just very dark, dreary in a way, but also beautiful because of the way that sadness, darkness, and dreariness are expressed through the visuals, through the music, through the ambiance. It's a sublimation of darkness in a way. Not quite unlike what Charles Baudelaire does with some of his poetry. So again, an interesting connection there. I guess the theme, or the thematic idea of redemption also creeps up, linked to that idea of darkness and despair and decay, trying to right wrongs that have been done, trying to help even if people don't want you there at all. Because fun fact, some of the mobs literally say, "We don't want you here," in a Cockney accent too, which is pretty hilarious. There's something really, really well done about that, and brilliant. But it's diffused in the gameplay too, and your exploration of the game setting. Like I said, it's not spoon-fed to you. You're not handheld throughout this game. And I mean, the Soulsborne games are known for something called environmental narration, so it's meant to be that way as well. But visually, there's a specific signature to Soulsborne games, or at least the ones starting from Bloodborne, so Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3, and I guess Sekiro to a certain extent. When it comes to Bloodborne more specifically, the setting and visual design definitely help to prop up the sense of deep, creepy, dreary atmosphere, the sense of menace, the creeping, developing horror from gothic horror slowly into more cosmic forms of horror. This game was beautiful as well. Visually, it was just eye candy. I mean, the gameplay is addictive for very specific reasons, but visually it's just such an incredible setting to explore. You want to explore, well, I wanted to explore every nook and cranny. I also have a very completionist attitude to video games. I like to do everything you can in a video game and complete it. However, I probably won't be able to with like Bloodborne because it involves the Chalice dungeons and stuff, but like for example, Breath of the Wild, I 100%ed it. Hollow Knight, I 112%ed it. I don't know why, I'm a perfectionist, so I need to do that. I wanted to explore everything in Bloodborne and DS3 as well, but it's very rewarding visually speaking. There are lots of little details that you might miss on your first playthrough or your first run of that level environment, but then you come back to it and you notice, okay, so that's a reference to that bit of the storytelling, to that bit of the theming, of the character work in a way. Of course, watching deep dives on YouTube about these video games helped as well. Everyone who's a fan of From Software obviously knows of VatiVidya's videos, and they're very good, and I enjoy his narration as well, so that's very enjoyable. But I've watched other video essays about the storytelling of Bloodborne that are like 2 hours long, so you can really explore this in depth, which doesn't preclude speculation, obviously, but still, there's a lot of content and material there that you can extrapolate from the visual elements. Just looking at a piece of architecture from a church, or a weird, creepy carving that might, foreshadow a creepy, ginormous monster you'll encounter later on in the game, things like that. Or even the monster and enemy designs have these little details you can can miss, but which then feels so satisfying to pick up on later on in the game or in another playthrough. Now, because of the setting of Yharnam, there's this very distinctive Victorian visual flair, gothic flair as well, that slowly creeps into more cosmic horror type things. And when I mean gothic horror, like I said, think Bram Stoker, think werewolves, think people turning into beasts that want to shred you to pieces. Fair enough, I suppose. To weirder tentacle types of things, and just squishy, cosmic horror-y, Lovecraftian-y monsters. That being said, there is a central setting of Yharnam, which is the heart of the game, the heart of the story. However, there are attendant environments as well. There's a foresty environment, there's I learned this later, obviously, but like, apparently every From Software game has the marshy environment, or the swamp environment. And the swamp environment of Bloodborne was so effing annoying. Oh my god. I went through, because like there's two parts to it too. I mean, brilliant design, don't get me wrong, like I applaud the designers for making it the way it is. But there's two parts to it. I got through the first part, then you get to a second part which features a shit ton of snake type things, and I died, and I died, and I died again, and I didn't have any money to buy health, and I was pissed, and I had to grind. But that is part and parcel of the From Software playing experience. Am I right? So yeah, level designs that will make you go nuts and howl in rage, but you have to respect the genius of it as well. So there is a fair bit of variety as well. Like there's a very urban environment, but there's a foresty swamp environment. There's a castle in the snow environment, which is still linked to the overall story, but it's also running its own sub-storyline, which is very cool. So you have these layers to the storytelling as well. And then you have the more trippy environments, linked with things like nightmares and where rocks bleed and spill viscera onto the ground, and you have very strange creatures roaming those environments, which are nightmare fuel. And you even have a lecture hall building. I loved actually that level. It's very small. That's my only complaint regarding it. But the lecture hall, loved it. It was wonderfully spooky and creepy, but I would have liked it to be a bit longer if I'm being perfectly honest. And I know for a fact that in the DLC there's also a fishing village environment, which is an obvious reference to the Shadow over Innsmouth, and I love that. And a creepy research clock tower. So yes, there is variety, but it's all linked visually and thematically, so there's a coherence to the variety of the environments. And so the enemies, well, it goes from the pretty mundane to the what the F is that? To the cursed. Though, ironically, perhaps, I think I found slightly more cursed creatures in Dark Souls 3. But then I've heard that there's a lot of design influence from Bloodborne that bleeds into Dark Souls 3. And yeah, I can totally see it. But like, so many times in Dark Souls 3 as well, I would go, that is fucking cursed, what the hell is that thing? Which is part of the charm, really. The only complaint, which to me was pretty minor overall, I might have, is that I didn't find the character design interface you get at the beginning of the game super intuitive. Then again, I don't think that's the most important part of the game. Like, I tried to make a character that kind of looks like myself. It doesn't really, and I didn't find any of the little parameters easy to gauge and judge onto the character. But then, you know, I've also been used to the Sims type character creators, which are much more advanced, but it makes sense. They're different types of games doing different types of things. It's not a major drawback as far as I'm concerned, but it's something I can point to being less good overall, but okay, whatever. However, I can also counter with the fact that fashion souls are a thing, and fashion souls are very fun. I have to admit, I don't give a crap about fashion in real life, but finding the flyest outfit for my character brings a level of delight that I really didn't expect. Though I guess I've had more fun changing it up in Dark Souls 3 than in Bloodborne, but I love the gothic, functional hunter aesthetic of Bloodborne 2. And then you have the sound design and the music. Okay, first can we just take a moment to agree that the music of Bloodborne fucking slaps. Oh my god. The thing is, when you play a game, or I mean, when I play a game and I'm in a boss fight, I'm stressed. I don't really have the mental bandwidth to pay attention that closely to the music. In fact, the music probably heightens the stress levels. Like, for example, when I was playing Hollow Knight, which has decent boss battles as well, I found it actually helpful at times to lower the sound to get through a boss fight. So when I'm going through a boss battle in Bloodborne or DS3, the music is a bit in the background and I'm just trying to concentrate on actually killing the fucker, right? But then I decided I want to re-examine the music because I had picked up on some pretty powerful visceral notes in some of the boss OSTs. So one day I was cleaning and I just went through the entire Bloodborne OST in my headphones. I would recommend that experience. Do some house cleaning while listening to From Software OST. And I was floored by the power of that music, by the variety. I mean, they're repeating musical themes, most definitely. It's all pretty bombastic, wah type music, but there is still some variety to correspond to the different kinds of bosses you're fighting, the different kinds of environments those bosses reside in, and that music just slaps so effing hard. That's where you see that OST composing has nothing to envy to like classical music composing. Someone who is more versed in musicology might strongly disagree with me, but that is my opinion as of now. What's interesting though about a game like Bloodborne or DS3 is that there is no background music when you're going through a level. You just have OSTs for boss fights, which is different from a lot of other games. It's not a difference I find good or bad in any specific way, it's just a difference. But yes, those boss OSTs. Wow! I have a special place in my heart for the Cleric Beast OST, the Father Gascoigne OST, and I mean, I haven't fought him yet, but I know what it sounds like, the Vicar Lawrence OST and the Lady Maria OST. I sometimes just play it on my computer for fun. And then you have the overall sound design. That's something which immediately grabbed my attention with Bloodborne and with DS3 as well. And the sounds made by some of the enemy types and by some of the things just happening in the environment. It's a very immersive soundscape. And oftentimes, given the thematic nature of these games, it's a very oppressive soundscape. I said that, like, some of the mobs in Central Yharnam, they'll actually tell you, if you pay attention, they say, "We don't want you here." And then you have these big, lumbering oaths, which are way too fast for the size, I might add. And just as they're about to smash your head in with a brick, they say, "Die." I love these little details. But then it gets oppressive, like I said. There's a level later on in the game where the cosmic horror gets cranked up pretty significantly. You get into this cathedral-type structure, and that's like one of the only levels that has background music. That's basically high stringed instrument notes to make you really on edge. And you have these enemies, which I chose to call Cthulhu priests, because of course I had my little nicknames for all of these enemies, as one does. And they make this ungodly squishing sound. It's that kind of sound. It was just horrible, but brilliant because it was horrible. And I was like, just stop making that sound. Why are you doing that, mate? And then one can't but mention the horrifically alluring and terrifying siren song of the Winter Lanterns. You have to love those Winter Lanterns. They're just singing about, and of course there's this funny mechanic in Bloodborne involving insight, which is a secondary parallel currency, and the more you acquire said insight, the trippier things get in the game, or at least you notice things differently, and it can affect the way some enemies harm you. And so these freaking Winter Lanterns just singing out to their heart's content before they eviscerate you, because why not? Because Bloodborne, because fuck you, I guess. But that is brilliant, that is genius in a way. And again, a mention of Dark Souls, near to the Cathedral of the Deep area, you amble about pretty nonchalantly through this cemetery type area, but then all these corpses start rising out of the ground, and they never stop rising out of the ground, because why would they in a Soulsborne game, right? And they start vomiting maggots onto you. But the sound they make when they vomit is so disgusting. Again, I have to give major props to the designers for this, because that was a new level of what is going on, what is happening to me I'd never experienced before in a video game. As I stated at the beginning of the video, Bloodborne was my first big girl game. I started playing this game and it took me, I don't know how many hours to get through the very first level, and I was like, okay, this is some next level shit right here. There's something weirdly rewarding about this kind of experience, playing a Soulsborne game. And all of you who have played Soulsborne games, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? You have these insane levels of rage and frustration. If you're not a pro gamer, I guess, and I'm definitely not. But then when you manage to accomplish something in the game, you have these intense shots of dopamine straight into your brainstem, and you feel like a god or goddess. It's a bit of an addictive feeling to a certain extent as well, because I'll go through a level and get killed again and again and again, but I'm convinced I can get through it, and I will get through it, damn it! Now, I mean, there's a bit of a meme now, I think, about the difficulty of Soulsborne games and then Souls-like games. And yes, I mean, they are hard games, but I think they're reasonably fair insofar as it really rewards you paying attention, judging whether or not you have the skills or the resources to tackle an area or to tackle a certain amount of mobs, which I like. It respects the player in a way. It's not condescending to the player. It doesn't hold your hand. And games shouldn't always have to hold your hand, just like a book doesn't always have to hold your hand either when it drops you in its world. I guess the only minor complaint I do have, though, about the difficulty level and the fair versus unfair question or aspect of the game, at times I did feel like the camera angle was being a bit wonky, and it shouldn't have been wonky. Or I got stuck on a piece of I got stuck on a piece of environment. One could argue, well, why did you back yourself in a corner there? And that's entirely true. But sometimes I feel like the camera just does weird little jiggles that then fuck you over majorly. And in those moments I felt, that is not fair. Screw you, game. Like, I did not deserve that. But otherwise, no, it is a hard but fair game. If you, well, know how to approach it and take your time to, well, gauge whether you should engage with enemies or a boss at the skill level you're at, and things like that. What I found fascinating about the game as well is the intelligence of the AIs, of the enemy AIs, and just how enthusiastically aggressive they actually are. I've never encountered a game where mobs will chase you for an entire level, basically, and they will stop at some points. That's the same thing in Dark Souls 3. If you can, like, figure out where they'll stop chasing you, that's very useful information to have. But they will chase you for a long bloody while, and it's like, leave me alone! When you're trying to take cover and, you know, take some health, but no, they're still coming after you, and I've never had that before in the game either. It was frustrating but hilarious in a way as well. Or sometimes you'll have an enemy, they're so, like I said, enthusiastic about ripping your guts out, they'll just jump off a cliff. That's actually welcome comic relief in a way as well, because you're just so stressed and pumped full of adrenaline, and then a mob just kills themselves, and you're like, ah! You're just laughing nervously because what the fuck just happened? But then conversely, you have enemies that will climb ladders after you. What the hell? Or an enemy climbing down a ladder on top of you. Like, what kind of game does that to you? Soulsborne games is the answer. And another little anecdote. There's an area of Bloodborne called the Upper Cathedral Ward and the Cathedral Workshop, and there are enemies in wheelchairs waiting for you with Gatling guns. What I assume are Gatling guns in any case. I walk up to this lovely fellow in a wheelchair with a Gatling gun, whack him with my big-ass sword, Ludwig's Holy Blade for the win, am I right? And lo and behold, instead of just dying on the spot, the wheelchair got catapulted over the void. That was just so unexpected, but hilarious. I just dropped my controller and laughed my head off. Like, again, what the hell just happened? He just whoosh, flew over the void. I was like, sorry, bro! That was hilarious. And so, yes, it's an RPG with, I guess, relatively simple leveling up mechanics. I'm really not one to judge this because, like I said, I've never played an actual RPG as such. And it's pretty straightforward, and the gameplay is actually relatively straightforward when you begin in any case, but it's just addictive in a way. I really didn't mind grinding after a while just to get those levels up and acquiring new weapons. And there's a nice variety of weapons, obviously, like the things you can actually use to kill the bad guys and the monsters and all that nice stuff. One of the neat things about Bloodborne is that, I guess, in that regard, it's slightly steampunk-ish, only insofar as you have access to firearms and automatic weapons. Even a cannon you can fire from your shoulder, though I didn't have a strength build, so I couldn't use that. And so this wide array of torture devices and instruments and blades and sharp objects you can use to massacre to your heart's content, and using a pistol and the parry mechanics and that godlike feeling you get when you parry successfully an attack and then eviscerate your enemy just shoving your fist in their guts. Yes, it's gory. Oh, didn't you know? Bloodborne, there's blood in the title. There's a shit ton of blood that's going to be sprayed in that game if you go into it, so you've been warned. It's also a game that values being aggressive, which I actually really liked. It encourages you to attack and attack and attack again, because then that replenishes your health, which is quite different from Dark Souls 3. There's definitely a big difference, in my opinion, between the gameplay style in Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne, especially since in Dark Souls I went for a sorcery build, whereas in Bloodborne I went for a skill one. So yeah, you're encouraged to just keep attacking and massacring foes around you, but sometimes you'll just get overwhelmed because 10 mobs will climb on your ass and destroy you. And that's a funny thing though, even when you level up, you'll kill things more easily, but I've noticed that things kind of keep killing you as easily. I mean, you do have a bit more resistance. Leveling up ups your defenses to various types of damage. But again, if you get overwhelmed by 10 mobs, even from the very first beginner level, you'll die, even though you could have massacred them pretty easily if you'd worked your approach differently. I found that interesting because, again, that's pretty different from other games I've played as well. Bloodborne is not a survival horror game, but there are horror elements, and it's not so much that you're in, well, actually sometimes you are in the dark, and that's pretty scary. There is a level that is in the dark, and it's tense as fuck. And sometimes also, you'll take an elevator, and a mob drops down on your head, and you're like, what the hell? So you also have these jump scare moments, even though it's maybe not a super horror heavy game like some other horror games can be, if that makes sense. And the thing is, Soulsborne games, they have this arsehole type of humor when you die. You died comes up in big capital red letters. Yes, thanks for rubbing that in. I love it. And I hate it at the same time. It really rubs that salt deep into your wounds. You learn to become humble when you play a Soulsborne game. And I like that as well. I'll mention some of my favorite bosses and enemy types. I mentioned that I nicknamed a few of the enemy types. So there's the friendly blobheads. I call them blobheads because they have blobby heads. And also I forgot to mention this, but the ragdoll mechanics for the corpses was hilarious to me. Dragging around a dead thing with the arms and the head jiggling around. It's morbid as hell, but it was very funny. And so yes, the blobheads. They're technically called celestial emissaries, I think. To me, they shall always be blobheads. You, of course, have the friendly Cthulhu spiders, as I like to call them, though officially they're named amygdalas. Then you have the Cthulhu priests, I already mentioned them, which I also call squishers, which, for my fellow A Song of Ice and Fire fans out there, you'll get that reference, because just that horrible squishing sound they make, really. And then the Winter Lanterns, which I'm just going to nickname the Cursed Ones. The Cursed Singers, whatever, those eldritch, what the fuckery horrors. And boss-wise, you know, I do have a special fondness for Cleric Beast, which is the official Training Wheels boss. You're confronted with that thing early in the game, and you're like, oh, shite. Though I think the first truly difficult boss I encountered was Father Gascoigne. I thought that was an absolutely great fight. Just an intense, insane rush of adrenaline from start to finish. Though the one that really enraged me the most early on in the game was undoubtedly the Bloodstaff Beast. That one was an absolute bitch to fight. And fun fact, I actually ended up defeating it, killing it on my own. And I died at the same time and I was like, no! Am I going to have to start all over? But no, the achievement appeared on the screen, so I did in fact kill it, but died at the same time. I was like, whatever, that's fine, that's good enough, at least I've defeated it. And I know it's an optional boss, but dude, I'm a completionist, alright? I'm gonna fight all the optional bosses if I can. Oh yeah, I did forget one enemy, a couple of enemies that just stood out to me. From Kinehurst Castle, you have the, I don't know what to call them, yokai ground mosquitoes, because, you know, they have these weird hair-covered faces that look a bit like the creepy girls in some Japanese horror movies. And they have these pouches filled with blood, and they're disgusting. And they jump around like maniacs, so F them. And then, they're not hard to kill at all, but the ghosts in in Kindhurst Castle. I'm not sure what their official name is. That's another minor complaint. I really would have enjoyed a bestiary in both Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3. That would have been fun. Those ghosts, again, that just goes back to the amazing soundscape aspect of the immersive experiencing of Bloodborne's atmosphere. You hear these women whimpering and crying all the time, and it's so bloody oppressive, and then you have these servants cleaning the marble flooring, and you're like, I'm sorry, I don't want to kill you, but I'm supposed to, I think. So you're massacring the help, basically, which is horrible. It's so fucked in the head, but in such a beautifully brilliant way. In this specific instance, I actually have to agree with the majority opinion that Bloodborne is an absolute masterpiece of video gaming. I do have to give a slight edge to Bloodborne over Dark Souls 3. I really enjoyed Dark Souls 3 as well. It's a similar game in a lot of ways, but it's also different in a few key aspects. I do find the gameplay or combat gameplay less overtly aggressive. Bloodborne really does encourage you to be aggressive. Strategically aggressive, but aggressive nonetheless. Whereas in Dark Souls 3, I mean, I played as a sorcerer. I went for a intelligence dex build, which apparently isn't the one you should go for when you're a beginner, but whatever. I wanted to use magic, and I never used the parry mechanic. I couldn't find a way of really integrating a shield into my build because I have a staff in one hand and a sword or a katana in the other. Whereas in Bloodborne, I use that parry mechanic as much as I can with those big guns I carry around. So the way I play those games is a bit different. And overall, I just prefer the aesthetic of Bloodborne and the thematic overlay of Bloodborne, this magnificent ode to cosmic horror and gothic horror. It's a magnificent blend of both. So yes, I agree. It is a masterpiece, and it's a very fun masterpiece as well. A punishing masterpiece, though mostly fair in its punishment, I suppose, with just enough of the creepy and the scary adjacent to also really drive those horror elements home, and the dreary atmosphere, and just all of that, and the fashion source too. There's just a tiny little detail, but I appreciated it. So yes, I'm going to leave off here. This is my little letter of strong affection and appreciation for Bloodborne. I hope you found it interesting, enjoyed this first little episode of a bookworm in Gamerland. And of course, if you are a From Software aficionado, if you are a Bloodborne fan more specifically, and you want to rave about this game in the comments down below and share your thoughts and feelings, share some of your favorite bosses, enemy types, fun little moments of gameplay, I'd be more than happy to read about them and exchange with you about that. In the meantime, however, I hope you'll have a lovely day, evening, or whichever time of day you prefer. Do take good care of yourselves, and I shall see you all reasonably soon in another video. Bye-bye!